Hello and welcome to a live video cast of stuff about writing, um, particularly how to redraft your dead story back to life. Usually I do Facebook videos, mixing in personal and work stuff, but I just figured seeing so many of my life hours are spent writing, I would talk a bit about the craft this time. Um, so I've been writing chapter 35, which is about 70% of the way through The Watch Thief. Um, and I have hit a dead stop. Um, Whatever I've been laying down on the page hasn't been working. And usually when this happens, I detect the problem fairly early. Um, and I look at ways to reinvigorate the story and maybe tell them from a particular character's perspective. I'll mess about with how I present a sequence of events to the reader. Um, I'll go in heavy with the geographical description and paint with words to create a portrait of how any particular city was at that particular month of the year. Um, but this time, nothing was working. Um, and I was also finding other research related problems. I have my big bundle of research right here. Um, a lot of that is for about 2 or 3 chapters. Um, so, uh, um, yeah, so I continued to write the story. It felt very much by numbers, and the research was also messing with how things were done. I had set characters to be in a set place, certain dates, and then I would read through the text again and find out they were perhaps ambiguously located. Um, so I'd fairly sort of worked it out. I'd worked out about 11 scenes, which is probably quite too many for the chapters. I generally want to, for Watch Thief, keep it 2,000 words or under. Ideally, a chapter, well, not ideally, but recommended is under 2,500. That varies from author to author and whatever particular beats in the book are being dealt with. Um, so what I did is I worked through the chapter, and about halfway through, when it really wasn't working, when it was boring me senseless with how much it wasn't working, I came up with a list of ways in which I could break it, I could tackle it. Well, when you're writing, when I'm writing anyway, um, each chapter has its own particular taste, if you like, its own sort of tone and theme and style. Um, and I think that's a moment where you sort of clue in that you're writing good work, and one needs to happen for the other. Um, so I came up with a list of tactics. I'm going to go through the list um, and then break it down in a bit more detail. So for sort of cracking that difficult draft, um, write your straight version. Write what you think needs to go in, even if you're not feeling it, just write it. Get the information down there. Get the dialogue. Um, which I often find easiest to write. Just tell the story. If it's crap, well, tough. Just do it. Um, so I did that. The second thing on my list was to write the story as a series of tweets. So yeah, that generally speaks for itself. If you've got too much word count, how can you tell the story in I forget what length a tweet is now, 300 characters. How can you tell a story in 300 characters, say for 8 to 10 beat tweets? Um, and I found this very useful. When I was writing Axel America and working with Andrew Gallagher, one of the first things he asked for was to break the chapters down in a series of sort of one line, what happens in this chapter. And the same can be done when you're still building a book. What do you want to happen? If you had to sell it, which I have to do, how does that break down? So I went ahead and I did that. I have chapter 35 here as a series of tweets. And my next step on my quick list, and this is a quick brainstorm, and you can come up with your own suggestions and share them. My third point was, how do I test this in accordance with Dan Harmon's story circle? Now I will go back a bit, because some of you might have missed me talking about this earlier or not be aware of the story circle. Dan Harmon's story circle is essentially a condensation of Joseph Campbell's monomyth. That is a series of ways to break down story. Campbell did a lot of research, lots and lots of stories, found 20 sort of steps, and you can pretty much take an awful lot of story and measure it against this. Dan Harmon of Community and Rick and Morty broke it down into 8 steps, pretty much comprising the hero's journey. And I can't read this off by here, but essentially, maybe I can. The character begins in a zone of comfort. They find something they need and they want. They search around to it. They maybe go on a quest and find themselves in unfamiliar territory. And things become uneven. They finally got what they wanted and they adapt to it. And then they, over this side, that's what I get for practicing in the mirror. They return on the journey and they find things have changed. They've maybe paid a heavy price for it, and they return to a new zone of comfort, as it was. Certainly with things changed, and it may not be a zone of comfort. But this is a really good guide for writing. I don't tend to first draft that way, but where the story circle is very useful is that it's a mobile, maybe not that board, but it's a portable sort of version. You can sketch it on a bit of paper, as I've done here, and you can use it to test how your story is working. You can use it to get a good grip on it and break it down. So that's what I've done there. I've built upon the series of tweets. And sorry, throat's a bit dry. This video cast also sponsored. I would like to thank Miss McKeown's, who supplied to Massam Gold, a wonderful local company. Highly recommended. Get in touch. So yeah, I broke that down. It's a good way of testing your story, security testing it holds out. And in this case, how it was useful, I found that this beat here, which is they want something. It doesn't really matter. It does, but I found this was weak. This was structurally flawed in my write-through version. And so I was able to spread out the details in other parts of the stories and build it up here. I say that I'm still editing the piece, and we'll see what happens. But this gave me a good way to test this and make sure my story has a good chance of being as strong as it could be. So the next step was to write my story as a list of metaphors. So I've went through each of the I have the key beats down, 11 of them, and that's too long. So I figured I can take away 3 of these. I can cut them down a bit, and if I can make up a metaphor, something that communicates that sense of what the scene is about, it tells a story. It might be something like a broken chair leg, which I'm probably using to illustrate Trebuch's uncomfortableness in a group setting, a particular group setting, and his own animated persona. It could be a particular sound or growing a sound. Now, I find metaphors particularly difficult to write when I'm thinking about writing them, or at least sustained metaphors. I come up with a handful of very short, like one-liners, like the chair leg. So what I've done is I've adopted an approach of writing everything, writing way much more than I need. And ideally, there will be stuff that sticks. If I go back to the metaphors for a moment, this exposed one of the problems in my my writing, my why I found the first draft so boring, and there was no sort of investment in location. I could have written this against a background of snow. So I went through the research again. I wrote about the various settings. Chapter 35 is probably going to open in Venice, which actually on first sight is fairly easy. You've got beautiful gondolas and canals, and the water seeps up to every doorstep. But the more I looked into it, yeah, I wanted all that stuff, but it was not going to work because I'd done a bit of location spotting. I would have Googled cafes in Venice, and I found exactly what I needed for on Street View. But it was nowhere near sight of the canals. So I mixed things like I've got a puddle of water flowing down the middle of San Marco Piazza from heavy rainfall the night before, splitting it up, and that creates its own mood. So going through each of my 8 beats, I managed to hone in on particular locations because it's very much like working on television or film. Whether you're writing prose or comics and poetry, you've got a location scout. You've got to find spots to put in. So this is very good because it tells you about climates. It tells you about your scenery. If you're doing it all right, you can just sort of really find a lot of information. There's so much available, and out of that you can draw on threads. The act of finding out about stuff will evolve certain ways of thinking about things and in turn certain metaphors. So just to go over it again. I wrote the first draft that I wasn't enjoying. I wrote it as a series of tweets. I wrote it as Dan Harmon story circles, and anything involving visuals will evoke the mind, will make it feel like a more creative process to you, the writer. And then I went through and described each scene as a metaphor. So now I have 5, 6, okay, let's be fair and say 4 times, well, 3 times as much text as I need for this chapter. On what I've typed up, I'm already up to 35,000 words. 30, 3,500 words, Peter O'Hanrahan. And from there, I can begin editing down. I can use a color-coded system or a bold to highlight the passages of text that I really feel I have done the language that I wanted to do that really communicates the sequence. I can begin to prioritize those. And I can cut away the stuff that's obvious chaff. And then as the sculpture takes form, I begin to whittle away at the stuff that doesn't work. I generally tend to highlight my chapters in terms of beats. So those 8 beats they'll be laid up at the top of the Word document, and then there'll be through the writing, there'll be one headline, some text, and then a second, and I can work through and start to bring that down to, say, 250, 300 words per 8 of the pieces. Maybe I can take down the stuff that's works fairly well, allow myself more time more words for the scenes that I think need more words. So much of writing, it really is rewriting, is redrafting. If you're not prepared to do that, you're a shit writer. That's just the way it is. And I hope these ways of looking at these tactics that I've outlined are really useful in turning your shit writing into something really good. Not that all of your writing. Sometimes you just go in, you nail it first draft, and you have to rewrite, but sometimes it's below your own expectations. This video, I hope, is going up on YouTube and on Patreon. I would like to thank my Patreon supporters. Michael Daly, Ursula Hyder Ali, David Annette, Linda Harley, Phil Weir, Peter Duncan, John Robbins, Richard Barr, Sean Duffield, Miguel Sierro. Between them, they have put together enough money for me to pay for monthly desk rentals, which I consider validation for what I'm doing, and my sincerest thanks to those guys and gals. You can find us on patreon.com/Andy Luke, along with other monthly process videos, art blogs, photo grids, the first shot of each chapter, and the chapter commentaries, which are proving quite popular, and I also have a lot of fun doing them. And good writing and good reading. Oh, and we have audio versions now. You'll like those. Thanks for playing.